IVM.
Hello and welcome to the Wire Talks. I'm Siddharth Bhatia. Tensions are said to be rising among members of the Indian community in Australia. Last month, a car belonging to some Sikhs in Sydney was damaged by some men with bats, which was captured on CCTV. Restaurants have said that they are being caught in a crossfire between Sikhs and others. Police are investigating this and other incidents, and some reports say deportations may be considered. Why is this suddenly broken out in Australia, where there is no history of intra-community violence among Indians in Australia? Dr. Surjit Dhanji of the University of Melbourne and the Asia Institute has been studying migration issues and is our guest today to discuss the sudden burst of tensions among Indians in Australia. Dr. Dhanji, welcome to the Wire Talks. A few years ago in Australia, Indian students were victims of violence, but this is the first time one has really heard of any such incident within the Indian community. What has happened?
You're quite right. In fact, the Indian student violence was part of my doctoral thesis. But this is the first time that we're seeing inter-Indian community violence, which is something of a novelty, really, because for decades the communities have been living together in harmony, coexisting, co-living, enjoying their various diverse backgrounds and things like that. But this is the first time the Harris Park incident that has sparked differences arising. We've had some minor issues that were also blown out of context. So I'll start off with the minor incidents, which we thought were signaling that there might be some tension undergoing. It was, like young students vying for the affection of a woman, a young Hindu Sikh gentleman and a young Hindu gentleman and a Sikh gentleman. And this got taken out of context, and it condescended into a interfaith faction that, the two religions were not compatible, and therefore, this wasn't going to be a good thing. And so it just got taken out of what was just an everyday incident into something that it wasn't. So it got hyped up into a faith-based, faction. That was the first sign. But, most of us ignored it because, it happens all over. It happens in India. It happens all over the world. It wasn't anything that was particularly unique in Australia. But then the new incidents that we saw in Harris Park, it relates to, I think, directly to the farmers' protest that's taking place in India. Essentially, it's the objection by the farmers to the 3 new laws that have come in. And Sikhs in Australia have been supporting the farmers in India. They're not about the laws per se, but their right to protest peacefully, their right to have access to internet and electricity during the protest, and, those kind of issues. There has been global media coverage of these protests with images depicting Sikh farmers at the forefront of the protests, even though there are people from different denominations participating in the protests. Some anti-farmer hype has become anti-Sikh hype in India, and this has permeated into Australia among some sections of the diaspora who still have and who still maintain links to India. And, Sikhs are identifiable through their turbans and their long beards. And outside of this, outside of this anti-Sikh rhetoric in Australia, I cannot recall any prior protests or violence from within the Indian community towards the Sikhs or to any other group of Indians.
So you said that it reflected what's happening in India, and we've heard of similar incidents, not yet escalated, but in Canada and Britain, where also Sikhs and others are there in fairly abundant numbers. Who would be the people who would protest against the Sikhs or be against the idea of the Sikhs supporting this in a foreign country where they've gone in their new home countries, host countries? Who would be these people? Can we describe them? I've been cagey or careful about describing them as belonging to a particular religion, but can we say that they're supporters of this Indian government?
I think I would be very wary of saying that they're supporters of the Indian government. However, some of the language that has been used to describe the farmers' protests, both in India, as the Sikhs having a Khalistani agenda, that is a separate Sikh state, which, has happened in Canada as well, and in the UK, the same, terminology is being used, and also the Sikhs being called anti-nationalists. So some of this language, and a lot of it is coming through the social media as well. I think this is being taken directly by the diaspora members who want to know what's going on in India. A lot of them, of course, don't read newspapers or go to online independent media. They just gather the information from the social media. And sometimes some facts are true, but there's a lot of fake news going on as well. So this fake news is what is being regurgitated. And some sections of the Indian diaspora who feel very close to what's going on in India are, I think, regurgitating all this information and getting hyped up about what's happening there, getting hyped up about, bringing those kind of issues here. There are some local leaders as well, community leaders, who are using the platform here because, they want to hype up their own social status within the society, and they will discuss these things at their temples or their congregations as perhaps as an identity building ideology or something like that. And then somehow things get, taken out of context and it all turns topsy-turvy and expresses itself. Either the youth take things into their own hands, or they're, under the influence of what they read online social media groups, and then they take things into their own hands. But what happens in India, I feel it should not be happening here, because Australian Indians are really foreigners in India. So why are these things happening here?
That's actually a very important and good question, because that same question about where do they belong
Yes.
has become very important, because you have migrated, or anybody has migrated to Canada or Australia, and the whole idea of that migration, and the US also, the whole idea of the migration is to set up a new life. And now to be hung up on what's happening back in your motherland, so to speak, but is excessive. But we've noticed that NRIs everywhere are getting a little aggressive about their links, and perhaps they're being encouraged there as well as here.
Yeah. Well, we in Australia on the social media, you'll find pages like Friends of the BJP or Friends of the Congress, and they have a following. So, and governments are using these social platforms also to target certain audiences. Some of the information that goes through leaders and even politicians, it really appeals to the national hype or to the belonging and the longing and the identity. So yes, it does have an influence to some extent. But, on the other hand, we migrated from our ancestral homes to make a new life. Some of us left these issues behind to start up a new life. So bringing the same issues back into your new country of origin, into your new country of destination, rather, is a bit, I can't quite say how you balance the two. Either you belong here or you belong there. You can't talk about democratic values in one country and then don't espouse the same values in the other country. How do you balance the two? It becomes rather complicated and very complex.
How did the local leaders who were not part of raising tensions or encouraging them or taking advantage of them, how did they react?
Diaspora in Australia is very heterogeneous. So a single incident like, the violence that took place, everybody will, say this is not what we want in our profile. The majority of the Indians who are in Australia have worked very, very hard to get where they are. They are well respected. They have built their careers. Their second generation, third generation are very well respected by the governments, their contributions to the economy and the social society and the structure. So after the student violence, we thought we were starting to build our social status again. So when an incident like this happens, we look unfavorably upon it, the larger context of the society and members of the diaspora, because these are isolated incidents. No religion says that you should, resort to violence. And, for the diaspora as well, we have adapted as well. We look at things from broader perspectives. We look at things that immediately concern us about our future generations, about our lifestyles here and what we can do to contribute and how the institutions can help us with our lifestyles and, get to a better future. We're always comparing ourselves to the other diasporas in the world, how the US has got so many people up at the forefront of public and political institutions and where we are going. So those are some of the things that we are looking at. When an isolated incident like this takes place, it's not something that we look upon favorably. We actually want to resolve it or dissolve it and tell parties on all sides to calm down, because the incidents that are happening, in another country, our ancestral home, of course. What happens there does affect us, but it shouldn't affect us to the point that we become violent in our chosen country of destination.
So I read somewhere that the police reached out to some respected or community elders, so to speak, or
yes.
people who are known to be participating in some sort of public life.
Yes.
You said that Indians, Australian Indians have not really taken to, and I suppose that's going to come inevitably, politics in a big way, or reach the heights that, let's say, somebody in England now has. But that's also been a struggle for 50 years, and only then it happened.
Yeah.
But that means the police has now got into the act and perhaps has seen this, and, the red flag has gone up. So that can't be very good, isn't it? Because the Indians, if I may say, are considered the model minority everywhere.
I didn't want to use those words, but you're very right. We do tend to be a model minority. We're the highest taxpayers. We're in professions that both the top end and other business, small and medium-sized businesses as well. Like I said, the Indians have worked very, very hard to get where they are. So, this kind of thing is a blimp on the model minority profile. It affects the social status of the community. And, it's very typical of Indians when something bad happens to one person, everybody looks at the rest of the community as if everybody, is stereotyped within the same gaze or the same paintbrush. I think it is just a blimp, and we shouldn't look too hard, although the police is concerned because of what is happening. Small violent groups and right-wing populism is rising in most nations, so they are vigilant as well. And they don't want to be complacent, especially, some of the recent terrorist acts that have taken place around us and globally as well. There were small signals that maybe, that were overlooked. The signs were there. Although I think this was a pocket of disenfranchised Indians, and hopefully it'll just, fizzle out there.
Actually, when you say that Indians are the highest taxpayers and respected and in good professions and highly educated, there is always a kind of underclass, isn't there?
Yes.
Which is left out of narratives, general narratives, and then, not considered. For example, when we talk proudly of the head of Google or Microsoft, we do not really, policymakers also don't really think of the millions of workers toiling away in the Gulf. And the same way, there must be some kind of underclass in Australia. So they are the ones who will eventually, perhaps, if there's some kind of crackdown, suffer, while it may be coming from more, shall we say, middle-class people. I'm assuming that, but that I'm just tossing that possibility.
One of the things that we must bear in mind is that there are several waves of migrants that have come from India to Australia. Among the earliest waves, the early migrants in the 1970s, when the white Australian policy was abolished, they came from all parts of India, all regions of India, and they came from other countries as well. So it was, a very, very heterogeneous diaspora at that point. And then since the 1990s, we've had the international students who have arrived here. And some of them, in fact, in 2006-07, part of the violence that took place was brought the students who were studying in the vocational education sector. They were, working in the hospitality and transport businesses, and their visibility raised their profile. So there was, yes, it's an underclass, you could say. And these youngsters were struggling with jobs. They were struggling with the ongoing violence. Then they were finding it hard to settle. Their parents had taken loans out in India. And I think some of them still continue to struggle. So if they are working at the behest of some other groups, I'm not sure whether that's what's led to this violence. But we do have our underclass, as every country does. And the diaspora certainly has some students who originally came who are still struggling. A lot of them have actually improved their status since coming. But on the other hand, there's a huge backlog of people who are still transiting from their student visa to temporary visa to permanent residency to citizenship. So they, in the immigration policy system, they still remain the underclass because they're neither here nor there. So underclass in, different aspects as well.
Yeah. And many of them must not be wanting to come back and want to settle down there and make a life for themselves. And a few naturally will manage it, but many may just slip under. And this is really a dilemma for not just them, but for the community and the policymakers.
Indeed, and the sad part of it is we don't really know what exact number of students or temporary migrants are stuck in this limbo. We're still trying to ascertain how many and where help is required. This is an ongoing process at the moment. But I think the communities largely are trying to help these students, particularly during the COVID pandemic. These temporary migrants, Indian temporary migrants, they were stuck. They couldn't return. There were no flights. They couldn't afford to take a flight. And the Australian government didn't recognize them as, they didn't qualify for any benefits from the government. So in that, your point on being the underclass, they were treated as an underclass, But the community came forward and helped these students, regardless of where they were from. The Sikhs started the Langars, which also raised the Sikh visibility. The Hindu Council came on board and assisted with groceries. Restaurants opened up, and also some of the temporary students themselves start becoming part of the voluntary services. So that gave them some status as well within the community. But yes, there is a part of the Indian community, a small portion of the international students who are struggling still.
Apart from you and your work, obviously must be interesting in keeping you busy. But apart from you, are there attempts to really do academic work on the Australian Indians? Or Indian Australians, because given that they've been around for about 50 years, 50 years, and came in waves, it's really time to look at them very, very closely and psychologically, sociologically, etc., try to understand what's going on, the dynamics of what's going on.
In fact, I'm probably at the bottom of the food chain. And I'm a relatively younger researcher. There are some much more qualified researchers working in the area. The part of the problem is that we're all spread around Australia, different states, and we We don't always get together to discuss it unless we have a crisis, which is when the international student violence took place. Then we all got together to discuss it. But there are quite a few very qualified people who've written things on the Indian diaspora. But the Indian diaspora itself is evolving as well. So we have new waves coming in, younger generations coming in, and the day-to-day issues are as dynamic and interesting as is the diaspora.
Now, ironically, all this has happened, even though it's I understand. Before that, I'd like to ask you, I understand that what happened in Iris Park has not yet sent loud alarm bells ringing yet. And it could be really good news all around if that subsides and doesn't flare up again in the coming months or years. But do you think that there is some kind of evolving issues, or let's say issues that are still dormant, which may show up in the coming years?
I personally do not think. I think this was a small incident that took place within Sydney, where there's a sizable diaspora, Indian diaspora, although I think the larger part is in Victoria, which is the state where I live. I certainly hope that this was just something that erupted because emotions got too high. And of course, with the ongoing police investigations and the threat of detention, which is detention and deportation, which is quite serious, because I think Australia has laws where if you're a citizen or a recent citizen, if you have any criminal activities on your record, it has the right to, divest you of that citizenship. Or if you have, I think they don't have dual citizenship with India, but that is something that they will be exploring. They will be looking at the reasons and how they can treat students or youngsters or whoever these perpetrators of violence were, what to do with them. I understand that detention is one of them, and they have been talking about deportation, but I'm not quite sure whether they're going to be deporting Australian Indian citizens or are they on temporary migration visas. I'm not sure about that because the police has just told us that it's under investigation. That's where we should leave it and not speculate.
So all this has come at a time, ironically, when Australia has just let it be known, or at least I read this, that Chinese and Indians are going to be priority in terms of people who migrate. Move to Australia. So that means they do consider Indians as important possible migrants to Australia. And really, all this has come at that time. But do you think that in any way is going to be affected?
I think first of all, at the moment we have no Chinese or Indian students coming through. Because of the COVID-19 pandemic. I've seen Indian students holding placards to say, asking the Australian government, when are you going to let us in? We have paid fees, we want a proper face-to-face education. So that there's a pressure building up. We have a little ongoing tension with China at the moment, and I don't know how that's going to fan out. I think the universities have taken a big hit in the student population because that was our fourth largest education export. Also, India was a contributor to skilled migration, but more and more of it was temporary migration. People coming to work and then on the contract and then going back at some stage. Giving citizenship is on the back burner for now. temporary migration is the way forward, as it's going on with the rest of the world as well. Globally, people, want mobility, but they only want temporary migrants. And certainly India and China fall into that category. They are the largest contributors to the growth in the population in Australia, to the growth in the diaspora, to the growth in the economy, and all the, positive things that you can think of.
So on this subject of intra-community tensions, you are largely optimistic and hopeful, cautiously hopeful, as we say, and
cautiously hopeful.
And on the other fronts, Australia will follow its own COVID policy, and which will impact everything downstream, which is what really most countries are doing at this moment. And not allowing people to come. I think tourist visa was also shut off. But you are largely, to sum up, hopeful.
We must remain hopeful. We must tell the Indian leaders of the Indian diaspora as well that, we need to be, like we say, we need to be vigilant. We must not be complacent. And we must keep an eye on these things and make sure that they don't get out of hand. Like I said, peaceful right to protest, it happens here as well in Australia. We all do it here, but we don't have violence here. So the one incident that sparks the violence, it happened in Sydney amongst the, two communities. And I personally thought it was directly related to the protest of farmers in India.
Yeah, but it's not very encouraging to see that the protests have been causing some ripples, minor, but some ripples in other diasporas. I just met and interviewed a few days ago the Mr. Tanmanjeet Singh Desi, who's an MP in Britain, and his comments were somewhat on the similar lines, that he has constituents who belong to every religion. But the most unfortunate thing is that Sikhs are being tarred as Khalistanis, and that narrative has to be quashed somehow. But even he was, and I'm glad to see that even you are. So this is actually very, very encouraging to those who are interested in these subjects in different parts of the world.
Well, Sikhs take this personally as well. They take it, as pretty confronting, considering the, what Sikhs have contributed to the history of India. So when comments like Khalistanis or anti-nationalists are made on social media, I think it has a provocative element in it. It's, it has an agenda maybe that's not related to peaceful harmony that we're all trying to pursue here.
Yeah. So computer of mine keeps telling me your internet connection is unstable. I've got all kinds of things going on here, and still it's become like this. But anyway, Surjit, thank you so much. It's certainly, we'll watch out for your other work, but it's certainly, again, to repeat, encouraging about what's happening or how you've analyzed it. And it's something that's come as a blip and will not grow any larger. So thank you once again for joining us at the Wire Talks.
Thank you so much.
So that was Dr. Surjit Dhanji of the University of Melbourne and the Asia Institute, who's been studying migration and diaspora issues, explaining to us and analyzing for us what the incident of violence between sections of the Indian community really imply. That's all for this week, friends. And we'll see you once again next week for another edition of The Wire Talks. You can check out this podcast and other interesting ones on the Wire website, the IVM podcast website, app, or wherever else that you get your podcasts. Goodbye from me, Siddharth Bhatia, and the Wire Talks podcast team.
I hope you enjoyed that show. If you aren't following us on social media, please do. We're IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. I'd like to thank our sponsors on the network this week, Siet Tires and The Whole Truth Foods. We really appreciate the support. So this week, tune into This Round is on Me with Gauri Devidayal. She invited Sonal Holland, India's only master of wine, and they discussed the goodness and business of wine, the pros and cons of being women in the hospitality business, and motherhood. On The Traveling Professor, Siddharth Deshmukh looks at evolution of search and wonders how voice search might change things yet again. On Advertising is Dead, Varun Dugirala featured Anirudh Singla of Pepper Content. He shared his perspective on the term content and how he sees it going forward. On Storytellers and Storysellers, Vinny spoke to Ayushman Sinha, head of Represent, a music talent management agency. He spoke about life as a manager and about nurturing new talent and paving a progressive career path for them. On Cyrus Says, we had entrepreneur, businesswoman, and Ruckus Avenue radio host Alexandra Masur. They discussed ethnicity, life as Desi American, Seema Auntie's matchmaking show, and a lot of other fun stuff. Also, IVM has an hour every Sunday on the Ruckus Avenue Radio Network, a US-based radio station that caters to the South Asian community. It's available on Dash Radio, and you can catch the episodes on the IVM Likes feed every Monday. On The Habit Coach with Ashton Doctor, Ashton asks us to commit to sleep and prioritize it over every party, work deadline, or binge watch session, as it is a crucial time when the body slows down for maintenance and recovery. And with that, I hope to see you again next week.
Hey, I'm Zarina, your peak performance coach, leadership coach, and life coach. And I'm here to unleash that power within you with your weekly dose of mantras and empowerment. Tune in to Monday Mantras every Monday for your quick fix, and the Empowering Series with Zarina Poonawalla every Thursday for riveting real-life stories. You can catch us on the IVM Podcast website, app, or wherever you get your podcasts from.